You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Cade Mila Vulture, you son of a gun.
Welcome to the party. I'm Dave.
And I'm a bird, a plane, and Warlord Scar.
Oh, it sounds like you're a metamorphing character this time.
Oh, well, I got bored of, omni-genocidal power sets, so I'm branching out. I'm still getting a 3-digit body count by the end of the session, don't worry about it.
I wouldn't doubt it.
We're here this evening to discuss a somewhat of a meme that's come along. You may have noticed, gentle listeners, that myself and Dave tend to be some of the more OSR facing folks in the adventure party, and we have a bit of tendency to reference an awful lot of these think piece blogs, both good and ill, of
Both.
yes, and the many thoughts and think pieces and screeds that you'll get on what's wrong with modern gaming and why we need to return to war gaming and funny hats. But one of the sort of bywords that have come up a lot in these kinds of discussions is the concept of the 5e style characters, the modern, and often each individual blogger will have their own turning point. Others third ed, it was second ed, it was fourth ed, whatever. At a certain point, the classic, in these people's minds, the classic D&D character. See previous episodes on OSR, on thieves or on fighters and scoundrels, etc. That this changed and this went away, and we are left with a phenomenon known as the fantasy superhero, where instead of someone who goes into a dungeon because they like gold and they like the sound of having lots of gold, this has been replaced by a desire to save the world and thus perpetuate a system whereby you turn from a random farm boy in the middle of the desert farming moisture until you turn into a fantasy superhero who has many, many, many adventures.
Glowing swords, magic, that sort of thing.
And we just like to discuss this idea because I think there's an awful lot to it, but I think there's the part that people complain about, and I think there's the bigger, broader scope of what it means to comic bookify your fantasy gaming, as it were.
The phrase has definitely come up in what we'll affectionately call the discourse. So you end up having cities where there's like high level characters wandering around while I suppose not doing the traditional adventuring things. Sorry, I'll be back in a second. Back. Somebody was pounding at the door, so I had to sort that out.
Okay.
So right, I've completely lost my train of thought. Right. Were we? Okay, so you could draw a line between, a line of sorts between like traditional, adventuring. You're going on. You've got basically scoundrels going off to get wealth and power. Maybe with some good intentions rolled in there somewhere, but you've got with the traditional. You have that traditional loop of go out, adventure, gain wealth, gain experience, be better prepared to do the same again.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe building into political ambitions or martial ambitions, and and on the other end you have, well, I suppose more. I'm not sure whether you'd call it site-based or event-based. The conceit of you're here to save the world and be the big heroes or superheroes even, because let's face it, your average 5e party could probably give the Avengers a run for their money after a bit. Like,
maybe. Oh wait, what's that? Through a quantum wormhole to the time beyond time, where dinosaurs can vote. Is that non-coming powerhouse of the adventuring party?
'Tis I!
'Tis he!
I am here! Which you may know from My Hero Academia's superhero, All Might. Now,
Yes.
here's why localization is important, ladies and jelly spoons. His original catchphrase, when translated directly from Japanese to English, is "I came!"
oh
Localization is
God!
important. Localization is important. You can't just directly translate.
Yep, you can translate the words directly, or you can translate the meaning. Please, God, translate the meaning.
Absolutely. And it's all, you can be like, yes, that is, you can use the words that way. You can, there's nothing, is the grammatically incorrect? No, not grammatically incorrect. Nothing wrong with it as a statement. It's just incorrect in that peculiar way any language can be, where you can sound crazy for saying things a certain way that is otherwise perfectly fine. But I'm here.
Yes.
And D&D character superheroes. Okay. So I've got a take on this one, which is basically a lot to do with design drift about what D&D's about.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the problem. And also superhero RPGs having some real difficulties squaring the circle on delivering a superhero experience.
Yeah, we had a previous episode on this, and we rolled at a couple of tables. I think we discussed the strengths of them as their, power simulator games, but yeah, the structural problems seem to have crept in as people have tried again and again.
Yeah, and if you look at, for example, a lot of games coming out now and going, oh, let's just do something that's a bit like 5th Ed, but with superheroes. Oh, dear God, it muddies the waters. It muddies the waters so much. Like, we get into the debate of should superheroes have hit points or not. And we've talked about why hit points are a good thing and why they're a useful meta currency and one that's very applicable. But it also means that your game feels a lot more like D&D. Innately, once you throw hit points out, your game starts feeling like D&D. I think you need to get quite bold with your superhero game to avoid it feeling like D&D right now, because D&D, a lot of magic, splashy magic powers on use, a lot of big whiz bang effects, like teleportation is a common trick for a lot of guys. Like, nearly every power that a superhero could have is accessible as a spell or spell-like ability, with a couple of exceptions, but not many. But nearly everything that a superhero could do, a D&D character can do with a spell, and they've spread the spells way out, in a way that, I look at it and go, ooh, I don't know about doing that. Like, everyone getting spells is their thing. I don't know. Homogenization of everything. But yeah. Where are you landing?
Well, I think there's the element of, well, yeah, the design drift, I guess, is a very good way of pointing it, in that D&D, starting off, original D&D was honed in on a very specific fantasy aesthetic that was very important to Guy Gygax, who was the pulp fantasy of his youth, the Fafhrd the Grey Mouser, Conan the Barbarian, the Dying Earth series, and these kinds of wild, imaginative, usually short form thing, where you would have these kind of episodic episodes of a character's life, but there tended not to be a huge amount of connective tissue between each one. I don't think anything that happens in any Conan story matters in any other Conan story, except I think there are like 2 stories after he becomes a king by his own hand, and I think they're both, he gets captured by a wizard. I think one of them he fights a monkey, and the other, I think he just has to go through a maze.
Unless you're reading the later Conan comics, which are not based in the original. It even said Marvel Comics Conan, where Marvel Comics Conan, for example, joined the Avengers.
Yeah,
Well, it shows up on Earth for a while, yeah.
Oh no, that's a very good example of the sort of, not only have we had drifts in how D&D is designed to emulate, we also have a drift in how media has become more comic booky in general, but we'll get there. My point was that when we started out, D&D was meant to emulate a very particular type of fiction, and then people realized, oh wait, role-playing is the best thing ever. I want to do everything with D&D. This was never a Justin 5th ed thing. People have always wanted to do everything in D&D. And so D&D had to drift towards being able to replicate pretty much any kind of fantasy experience. First, it had to Lord of the Rings-ify, I guess is one way to put it. It had to put more emphasis on being unusual creatures, be elves and dwarves fighting but coming together for the common good, fighting the Dark Lord, that kind of stuff. And the other similar books that came after, Song of Shannara, man, you said like the doorstop fantasy of the 70s and 70s through 90s became
the Wheel of Times, as you were.
Yeah,
the Belgariads, the Terry Goodkind. Oh God, is that objectivism?
Yeah, it's quite a drift in what's regarded as fantasy. Like,
yeah,
I made my bones as a reader there. You'll find nothing to surprise me with.
Yeah,
many a lengthy series was read in the day.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. This change in focus meant that D&D design drift meant move from the sort of episodic dungeon-focused adventures of the early days more towards, well, a system where in theory, your character can be like a character from any one of your favorite fantasy books, not just Guy Gax's appendix, and write your own appendix in. That's D&D now. And generally, when you make a rule set more flexible and able to do more different things, you kind of have to, you're very much of a risk of power escalation. See also all those build your own powers superhero RPGs where they gave you points and say, buy all your own powers. And the intent was you to make Spider-Man, but instead of making Spider-Man, you just make Spider-Sense Man, who can predict the future for 3 years in advance and can solve all problems just by predicting the future. And other similar issues in min-maxing and opening up the power set, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I mean, I look at it as you've gone away from... In the interest of playability, they've made characters a lot more like superheroes in that damage is much less of a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you went back and looked at older D&D, damage was a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
There was no healing to full. And there was, in fact, if you went to 0, you were out of it. Like in AD&D, if you went to 0, that was the end of your adventuring day.
Well, depending on which version of the dying rules, because there was a different one in the PHP and the DMG, but that's aside the point.
But if you went to 0, certainly one iteration of AD&D, you're done. You can't heal for the day. You basically can be stabilized, and then you need a day's rest, and then you can be healed.
Yeah, because it was trying to, bring a risk reward, cost and consequence style game of how deep do you go in the dungeon, how many threats do you try to take on in order to get extra gold. But that doesn't work in the more narrative structure that these other fantasy influences and general fictional influences put on it, where suddenly narrative momentum became way more important, and stopping for 2-3 days a week to heal all your hit points suddenly would just put a shotgun to your brakes or to your clutch.
It's certainly a problem of players going, right, the 5-minute adventuring day was toxic for some GMs. It made them squirm in their seat like they had intestinal parasites. They're like, it's taking all the tension away. Where's my resource management gone? And it wasn't a real issue of there being no pressure to just leave and then come back. And I think that was one of the things that Wandering Monsters was kind of there for. To punish that behavior a little bit. Oh, you're going to walk all the way back out, right? 5 rolls on the random encounter table for you. It is then. And the stuff that was in there, I'm not going to say Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson were geniuses, but they definitely saw some of those problems and tried to throw the odd banana peel in the way.
Yeah, I mean, talking about intestinal parasites, there was various we call lifestyle simulator tables in the DMG to make sure that people had to spend all that gold they got to get training to level up, or every so often they had a chance to get disease, and well, that means you have to go to the cleric and donate X thousand gold pieces to the local temple. That all these different ways to you extract wealth from an idle adventurer in order to get them back into the dungeon again. But the problem was that the effect of those was, it felt weird if you were, we are the guys who are saving the world. Why are we being charged at the temple for our intestinal parasites when they just give it for free because we're saving the world? Became a sort of undercurrent in plotting as we went into the 90s, then 2000s, and so on.
You see, I think nobody was super happy with their character's motivation be, I'm in it for the money. I like the luxury lifestyle it gives me. I like the fancy food. I like the good wine. I like the companions and song. I'd like some of that because you don't get to feel that. You don't get to experience that. You don't get the high your character does from doing all that. Some people will kind of do it to try and roleplay it. It's not the same, describing hedonism or role-playing hedonism is not the same as hedonism. And I think that's been lost in favor of these people are trying to save the world. Whereas there are other iterations of D&D or kind of explorations of D&D that will be interesting, and they've gotten kind of pushed out of the wayside because we're saving the world's at stake is a great narrative to run once or twice. And then it starts to feel like you're always trying to escalate, which can be an issue. But like heroism feels good, it was easy to write. So that's why I began thinking, like, who writes the RPG of you guys are effectively monster exterminators trying to control an out of control dungeon, and there's nothing bigger happening. It's just that you just need to go down and fix that problem. Doesn't happen very much anymore. The low level stuff has been jettisoned because the superhero-ish stuff is a better sell, and is innately kind of attractive and rewarding. Like, I think a lot of RPGs, well, a lot of TV shows certainly, and certainly the Marvel films have run into trouble of going too big too fast. Where they've done Thanos, they've done the Infinity Gauntlet, which is one of the biggest Marvel stories ever. And
Where'd you go from there?
yeah, going on top of that,
Yeah.
they go and start going multiverse stuff, and I said, "Oh, you're playing with high fire here, guys. It's so difficult to make stuff matter after you do multiversal stuff."
Yeah, that's one of the things is like there's like 15 years of Thanos bedeviling the space before he actually does the whole Infinity Gauntlet thing in the comics. And like I think he's actually like dead for like he shows up for first set of adventures, fights the Silver Surfer a bit, then he gets turned into like a statue for like 10 years, and then he comes back and starts really messing people up. So yeah, like I think, as we've said in our previous episode about progression, with that, one of the benefits of early progression-based RPGs is that you would start off with that rat catcher mentality, where you are lean and hungry and out for any break you could get, and then you would, in theory, morph that into, well, now I'm well healed. Now I've gotten a few thousand gold pieces under my belt, but now I need to sustain my new lifestyle, or I have political goals. I need to, give favors here, pay for broken curses over there, maybe get a few armies under my belt, and there's a deeper thing about like they never came up with a robust system for how to turn your massive gold into actually useful and narratively interesting things to do, because they assumed you would just stop playing D&D and start playing chainmail.
Yeah, there was some baked-in assumptions there, and there's a difference of baked-in assumptions at this stage. Hence the episode.
Yeah, but yeah, we have this dichotomy as D&D became, by, I want to say by accident. I know you can say a lot of deliberate actions were made to, but I don't think any one person, at least not until 2000 when it was sold to Wizards of the Coast, I don't think anyone sat down to say, well, D&D has to be the everything RPG for all possible fantasy gaming. It didn't, it just became. It started as the market leader. It never lost its market leader status, and most of the popular rivals were, a different interpretation of very similar themes. So it never got a chance to say, well, to focus in on what themes it wanted to bring across itself mechanically, and therefore external desires, which became more superhero-like as they went on, began to dominate the design. And again, I don't think anyone sat down. I don't think the people, in the third ed character optimization forum on the WhatsApp website went, well, let's just break the fantasy, just turn us into superhero, into Avengers, but we wear tights. Wait, no, that's a bad example. But I don't think anyone actively said that they were trying to force D&D to become a superhero game. It just became drifted that way because of people's unconscious desires.
I mean, it definitely went down a particular type of rabbit hole, and that playstyle has been refined and kind of expanded and refined and expanded. And the bits that people saw as awkward crusts to that playstyle were carefully pruned off. So things like different leveling rates, restrictions on who could use magic weapons, basically casting prohibitions, all of that stuff is carefully pruned away, and you start to see the game change a lot of its functionality. And everyone wants to be useful at every level. And all these things, they sound like great ideas. Oh, the wandering monster tables are tedious. Get rid of them. And as you prune them off, you you get to a stage where you're more like somebody with fantastic super abilities than you are a kind of desperate-ish fantasy character. Because a lot of the time the world building in D&D doesn't explain why everyone's going into dungeons really well. Not anymore. Because it used to be a post-apocalyptic thing where there's resources in there. Or you can look at Earth Dawn where they do a really good explain. These were Fallout bunkers that people use. There's stuff in there we want. Or like I've had an idea for one where basically everyone generates magic power and you shove people in a dungeon because that's a way to siphon off their magic power to make stuff with. So then breaking into a dungeon, it's a jailbreak. Which is what they are. They're dungeons.
Yeah.
They're where you put people you're locking up, so you're jailbreaking people. And I think that would put a whole different spin on D&D, or a type of thing where it's like you're going in to rescue people. Monsters take people prisoner, they drag them in, they chain them up, they use their magic powers to make horrors and stuff to attack the rest of us with. So they can imprison more people. You've got to take it out. Then there's a lot of Japanese settings. They love the dungeon is a magic creature, magic zone that appears and expands and grows magic crystals inside it. And you kill the monsters and you harvest the magic crystals because the magic crystals can be used for stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you can get. The only place you can get stuff. So
harvesting.
Yeah. There's a lot less ecology of the dungeon stuff. Why do they exist? Oh, a crazy wizard did it. At best, you're going to get a crazy wizard did. At worst, you're going to go, it's dungeons. They're just there. You know, and it's an evil wizard's lair. And I'm like, why is an evil wizard living underground? Going, good God, guys, can we not get some light in here?
In the terms of superhero references, I want to make. I'm starting to think of that. Do you ever see that episode of Batman the Animated Series, where it's like the villains all team up and capture Batman and put him on trial, saying, "We wouldn't have become supervillains if you weren't so mean to us. It's your fault that we exist." And they all have to make arguments that actually the supervillains exist for the benefit of something for the superheroes to do.
That's actually always the biggest problem with Batman. The villains have to come first. If the villains come first, Batman is justified. If they don't, it's his fault. And weirdly, Nolan is the most right-wing filmmaker in the world, so I understand why he made that argument that Batman came first and the villains escalated by becoming supervillains. Gotham, the TV series, does it the other way around. All the villains show up first. And that's the right way to do it. The whole point is Batman is if Batman's a superhero, what he's doing is a response to the police being unable to handle supervillains. And he basically has to go, right, well, I need to do this to stop them because the regular cops can't handle this. They're too crazy, they're too strong, they're too powered by international leagues of assassins or paid off by mega corporations or something. You can't beat these guys with regular cops. The Batman, must face them instead.
Yeah.
And then he's a hero.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's sort of the work that D&D finds itself not able to do is justify, people want to play as these amazing heroes. Why is there a threat for them to fight? Well, there's a whole bunch of dungeons here, and they have monsters in them, and monsters are bad. So go into the dungeons and roll dice at the problem, and it'll be fine. And again, it's what, as I say, it's a perfectly fine thing to do once or twice, but it maybe doesn't have the sustaining power to sustain a long campaign that people kind of hope it was. And because they're unable to they find themselves unable to take a stance about D&D being for a particular type of fantasy, thus they cannot design around this problem. Other superhero elements that I think are creeping into things is this is sort of a counterpoint to the idea of sort of episodic storytelling that was more in tune with the original pulps. Because for folks who don't know, Pulp magazine would probably been about monthly most of the time, but you wouldn't necessarily have the same character showing up every month. And
They were very
Like,
episodic, generally.
Yeah, you'd have say like one Conan story would be probably split into 3 parts and would be over 3 months of the thing, and then you probably would have had a break of Conan while Robert Howard came up with more stuff, and some other upcoming writer would come in and fill the rest necessary number of pages for a thing, and then you would come back and have another couple of months of Conan. And I think that was more in Gygax's head when he sort of imagined the the pacing of a given character's career in D&D, is that they would go in, they'd have all kinds of effort, see how far can get in. If I can get to 2 levels lower, I know where there's trolls who definitely have got treasure, and that kind of thing balance. And then the party would leave the dungeons, go their separate ways, because they were individuals coming together for an expedition, not a locked step group, and each would go on spend the necessary number of in-game weeks to heal all their hit points and spend all their gold, and then then whenever a given character was ready for prime time again, there would be a new party, some of the same members, not all of them, and go in again to have a new adventure. And this would be the flow of a character's career. A given character would probably work on a couple of different dungeons in their life, assuming they lived, of course, and they'd be in and out in the sort of repetitive but unique each time sense. And that's not. We've have previously discussed how that didn't pan out as the actual pace, where people wanted to have this. Okay, why are we in the dungeon? We're trying to get a thing in the dungeon for insert plot element here, and therefore the resting up time idea sort of felt bad. And then also because player characters parties were like basically cohabiting as all the time. There was always a cleric there to heal everyone full hit points every couple of days. So the idea of having to take a week out to rest and recruit disappeared, because just magic the pod weighing in off to the next adventure. And this new pace, which is more to do with as a comic book pace, where every month on the dot is the next couple of pages of this ongoing saga of a person's foibles, their ups, their downs, what's the villain this week. Okay, we've dealt with the villain this week, move on to the next. A plot might last 1 issue, it might last 12 issues, depending on how the readers react to it. We build up to big, super epic things over the course of, entire writers' arcs. Writer stays in the book for 2 years. You'll probably have a couple of big plot points in their thing, really impactful stories. But then, it's a rising and falling cycle. What I'm saying is, like, rather than we've gone from episodic storytelling, which was the original design intent, to more continuous storytelling where no one sits still. Well, why would these people ever want to have a mansion or to build a castle or to hobnob with rich people? In 2 more days they're going to be off the Tomb of Horrors, to pull the silk off the walls and also stab a lich or two. Because they are in the business of heroing as their entire shtick. They don't need to indulge in side activities. That would just be wasting time, which you could spend saving more people's lives or getting revenge on more dark father figures or what have you.
I think, it was just they decided they weren't interested in that stuff. They didn't see the point of it. They didn't see the fantasy of it, or they didn't get to see any juice in it. And we've steered into being superheroes. And there's nothing wrong with having fantasy superheroes. It's fine, but the mechanics are going that way, and the narratives are going that way. And I think that's why it feels that way.
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually happening. That's why we think it's happening.
Yeah, yeah. But like, I want to say, like, in terms of solutions, like, a lot of the OSR people will wail and bemoan and say we need to go back to the original design intent of scoundrels in a hole in the ground style of play. But as we said in our recent episode on progression, that actually is not trivial to do. You have to design for a certain power level, and to make sure people are interesting at that power level, and that your ideas of tactical infinity and people being able to do as they need in a game, that you have the framework in your game to actually pull that off. And because a lot of that is GMing advice rather than strictly a set of rules, that's harder to mechanically enforce and bring through in your game. A lot of OSR products end up speaking a lot to the GM and trying to give the GM appropriate tools for that job, but they don't have the ability to reach out to players and say, this is why you should play a random nobody who's probably going to die. That'll be fun, right? They try to pitch this, and often what it comes down to is their ideas of being rules light or tactically infinite, where you can try anything. The GM will let you do it. We've given them a lot of reasons to do it, and they haven't necessarily sold the fantasy of, well, what is it going to be? Is there going to be an interesting system for if I become mayor of the town, or I decide to build a castle on top of a pillar? Do you have a cool mini game that I can play with all these gold pieces? If I collect 7 rubies, can I put them together in a scepter that gives me +1 charisma versus ruby loving?
The thing we also have to remember is that some GMs long to be the Viking Hat GM, and that is a very dictatorial GM who takes a position that the GM is God. What I say goes, no matter how foolish. And if I wish to bat you around, like a more capricious god might to some mortals as you struggle and whine, that's for you to put up with. And characters being more powerful and having more options, like just being able to leave an adventure, is upsetting to that GM. Yeah. They're not super comfortable with that much agency.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, if you have a rules light system that puts so much more emphasis on what the GM's interpretation of things, people will feel, well, why would I bother? I don't have agency in the system. And the agency of being a 5th ed character who could, after level 3, fight several armed platoons and make a good run of it, that just seems to appeal more overall. There are solutions, but they're difficult game design solutions that people have been working on for decades and they've made headway, but I'm not sure that it's a solved problem anyway. And we can see why people want to go back, but also why we drift to the place that we have. There was one other thing about like Joker style recurring villains and the problem with them, but maybe we can leave that for another time. Maybe
look, they'll show up again for sure.
Yes, because we've only killed them 3 times because it's so much simpler than sending them to Arkham Asylum. But
I have my pitch for why you don't kill the Joker. Actually,
yeah. I mean, well, maybe, gentle listeners, you can join us next party time, same party channel, to see our discussion about why Ant-Man is the true comic superhero genius that you need to be reading, and why, I don't know, Thanos is probably just a metaphor for drugs or something. But if you'd like to argue this at length, for both comic continuity and RPG design problems have both kept audiences arguing for decades, you can come do that on our social media, preferably our Discord channel, because that's where the real magic happens. And for now, we must jet off to stop Dr. Abominable from turning everyone into octopuses. So,
this party is in fact over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. Join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.